The Tower of Babel. Long ago, all people spoke one language. They built a great tower reaching toward the heavens, not to honor God, but to make themselves famous. But pride divided them, and their voices became many. The world was scattered. Yet from this broken world, God chose one man. His name was Abram. God said, "Leave your land, your family, and your past. Walk into the unknown. I will make you a blessing to the whole earth." And Abram obeyed. He walked across deserts and mountains, carrying nothing but a promise. God led him to the land of Canaan and said, "This land will belong to your children." But Abram had no child. Years passed, storms came. Hunger drove him to Egypt. Fear tested his faith. Yet God protected him and brought him back stronger. Abram became rich, but peace was more precious. When his nephew Lot quarreled with him, Abram chose humility over power. Lot chose the fertile valley, not knowing it would lead him toward darkness. War came. Lot was captured. But Abram did not hesitate. With only a few men, he chased powerful kings and rescued his family, not for glory, but for love. God then spoke again. "Do not be afraid. I am your shield. Your reward will be great." Under the night sky, God showed Abram the stars. "Count them if you can. So will your children be." And Abram believed, and that faith changed history. God sealed his promise with fire and light. Still, years passed without a son. Sarai, Abram's wife, grew tired of waiting. Through her servant Hagar, a boy was born, Ishmael. But this was not the promised child. God had something greater. Abram's name became Abraham, father of many nations. Sarai became Sarah. And God said, "Next year you will have a son." Sarah laughed, but God replied, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" And laughter became life. Isaac was born, the child of promise. But then came the greatest test. God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and offer him to me." Abraham walked up the mountain in silence. Isaac carried the wood. Abraham carried the knife. At the altar, just as the blade was lifted, a voice from heaven cried out, "Stop!" A ram was provided, and Abraham learned the greatest truth. God does not take life, he gives it. Because Abraham trusted, God declared, "Through your family, all nations of the earth will be blessed." And from one man's faith, the story of salvation began. Jacob's two children struggled inside one womb, and God spoke before they were born, "Two nations are in you. The older will serve the younger." The first came out strong and wild, Esau. The second held his brother's heel, Jacob, the one who would follow and one day lead. They grew into opposites. Esau hunted the fields. Jacob stayed near the tents. One day Esau came home starving. Jacob was cooking. "Give me that red stew," Esau begged. Jacob looked at him and said, "Sell me your birthright." And for one bowl of food, Esau sold his future. The promise of Abraham was traded for hunger. Years later, Isaac prepared to bless his firstborn. But Rebekah remembered God's words, and Jacob, trembling, entered his father's tent, wearing his brother's skin. His voice was Jacob's, but the hands were Esau's, and Isaac blessed him. When Esau returned, the truth shattered the house. Hatred was born, and Jacob fled into the night. Alone in the wilderness, he laid his head on a stone, and heaven opened. A ladder reached from earth to the sky. Angels climbed between worlds, and God spoke, "I am with you. I will not leave you. Through you, all families of the earth will be blessed." Jacob named the place Bethel, the house of God. He ran east to Laban's land, and there he met Rachel, the love of his life. For her he worked 7 years, but was deceived. He woke beside Leah, and so he worked 7 more years. From sorrow and rivalry, God built a nation. 12 sons would rise: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun. Joseph. Through pain, God was shaping destiny. Jacob prospered. Laban grew jealous, and God said, "Return to the land of your fathers." So Jacob fled again, with wives, children, and flocks. Laban chased him, but God stood between them. Now only one fear remained: Esau. Jacob sent gifts, camels, sheep, servants. Then he prayed, "I am not worthy of all your mercy, but save me from my brother." And the night grew silent. Ahead of him waited the brother he had betrayed, and the destiny God had promised. The deceiver was about to become Israel. From Jacob to Israel, from the pit to the palace alone in the darkness, Jacob stood at the river. Behind him, his past. Ahead of him, his brother Esau. Then a stranger stepped from the night. They wrestled until dawn, not with fists, but with destiny. When the sun rose, Jacob was wounded but changed. "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob." "No longer. You shall be called Israel, and for you have struggled with God and lived." And Jacob limped into a new life. Soon after, Esau came. 400 men. 400 reasons to fear. But instead of a sword, Esau opened his arms. The brothers wept. The past was buried. God had turned hatred into mercy. Yet darkness still waited in Jacob's house. His daughter Dinah was violated. His sons answered with blood. Violence spread. Fear returned. But God called again. "Go back to Bethel." Jacob buried his idols, washed his family, and returned to the place where heaven once touched earth. There God spoke, "Your name is Israel. Kings will come from you. Nations will rise from you." But sorrow followed him. Rachel, the love of his life, died giving birth to Benjamin. Jacob wept beside her grave. Then his father Isaac died. The old world was passing. A new one was rising. Among all his sons, Jacob loved one most: Joseph. He clothed him in colors. He filled him with dreams. But dreams can make enemies. Joseph dreamed of stars bowing, of sheaves kneeling, and his brothers hated him. One day in the fields they seized him. They tore his robe. They threw him into a pit. And for silver they sold their own brother. Joseph was taken to Egypt. Jacob was given a lie, and the house of Israel was broken by grief. But God was not done. In Egypt, Joseph was enslaved, then falsely accused, then imprisoned. Yet God was with him. Dreams followed him even into chains. One prisoner was restored, another was executed, and 2 years later, Pharaoh dreamed. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, and God raised Joseph from prison to power, from a slave to ruler of Egypt. The world bowed. The famine came. And from Canaan, hungry men traveled to Egypt. Joseph's brothers. They bowed before him, just as the dreams had shown. They did not recognize him, but he recognized them. And he wept. The story of betrayal was becoming a story of redemption. Far away, Jacob waited, afraid to lose his last beloved son, Benjamin. But God was guiding every step. The pit, the palace, the famine, the reunion. All of it was part of something far greater. Because from a broken family, and God was building a nation, and through that nation, he would change the world. Joseph, from tears to a nation. The famine did not end. The grain was gone. And Jacob's sons had to return to Egypt, but this time, they could not go alone. They had to bring Benjamin. Judah stepped forward and said, "I will be responsible for him. If I do not bring him back, let the blame fall on me forever." With gifts, silver, and fear in their hearts, the brothers went back and stood again before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin, his mother's son, his heart almost broke. But he hid his tears. He welcomed them into his house. He gave them food, he watched them, and he tested them. In secret, he placed his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. When the brothers were stopped and accused, terror fell upon them. The cup was found. Benjamin was guilty. The others could go free. But Judah stepped forward. He told of their old father, of his sorrow, of the son he could not lose again. And Judah said, "Let me remain as a slave instead of the boy. Do not let my father die." And Joseph could take no more. He sent everyone away, and he wept. "I am Joseph." The brothers froze in fear. "You sold me into Egypt, but God sent me here to save lives." Tears fell where hatred once lived. The family was restored. Joseph sent wagons, food, and clothing to bring his father down. And when Jacob heard that Joseph was alive and his spirit came back to life, the family of Israel entered Egypt, not as slaves, but as honored guests. God spoke to Jacob in the night. "Do not be afraid. I will make you a great nation here." Joseph ran to meet his father. They embraced. And for a long time, neither could speak. In Egypt, Israel grew. They became many. And Joseph ruled wisely, feeding both Egypt and his own people. Before Jacob died, he blessed his sons, not with power, but with destiny. To Judah, he gave kingship. To Joseph, fruitfulness. To the family, a future. Then Israel slept with his fathers. Joseph wept, but he did not lose hope. Years later, his brothers feared him. But Joseph said, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to save many lives." And when Joseph himself was dying, he made one final request. "God will lead you back to the land he promised. When he does, take my bones with you." Because this story was not over. It was only beginning.